It was very hard for me, actually. I felt like a fish out of the water in that bunch, in that group of people. So it wasn't really fun. I hate to say it, but it's true. It wasn't really an enjoyable experience. George was very sweet to me, you know, and he was cool, so that was nice. But, you know, it was something I really kind of had to get through.
So hi guys, Jonathan Graham here. We are in the beautiful setting of Loch Lomond here with an absolute guitar legend. It's Mr. Robben Ford. How are you today, sir?
I'm all right, thank you.
Taking it right back to the beginning, where does music begin for you? Do you remember a time where you were really moved by something that you heard?
Well, I always loved music. I mean, that was just there, you know, so it kind of, because I couldn't find a beginning, you know what I mean?
It was there before you were there?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's just there.
There.
I can say that, you know, of course, you know, here's a piano. I want to learn how to play piano. So I asked my mother for piano lessons, and I think I was 6, and maybe 8. And I really struggled with trying to learn how to read music. I just wanted to play the thing. So the teacher would play the melody, and then I would pretend that I was reading the notes, but I was playing it by heart.
Okay.
And my mother, when she realized that's what was going on, she said, "No more piano lessons for you." And I don't regret that at all. But at age 10, my older brother Patrick, a couple of years older than me in school, he's in junior high. I'm in the 5th grade. And he had taken up drums, and he was playing with the junior high school band. You know, it's trumpets and saxophones and whatnot. And there was a performance at the junior high gym, you know, and we went. The band was on the floor and kind of in a semicircle in conductor, and this guy came out front and was featured playing alto saxophone, and I just had a major epiphany. I said, "Mom, that's what I want to do," just like that. And so a couple of weeks later, I had a saxophone, and I was taking saxophone lessons in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
Age 10.
And was it the sound of the instrument in particular?
I don't know. You know, it might have been the fact that he was the soloist, you know. I don't know. I really don't. It was just like, that's what I want to do.
But for you now, that's still a feeling that when you talk about it, you can feel that straight away.
I remember it, you know, like I was hit like a thunderbolt.
Does that same feeling, because obviously people that talk about, you know, being in the zone when they play live, and you're obviously a tremendous improvisationalist. Do you sometimes chase that original feeling when you're on stage? Is that something that you're aware of that gets you into the zone?
No, I don't have to.
Wow.
You pick up the instrument, you're in the zone.
Okay.
That's it.
And has it always been like that for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I remember struggling with the instrument, you know, like feeling like I was terrible, you know, and getting mad at myself and, you know, like that. I remember the pain, you know, painful aspect of not living up to your own expectations of yourself, you know. But at a certain point, I just stopped competing with myself, you know, like probably in my maybe mid-30s, you know, it was no longer a competitive thing, you know. And when I say competitive, I wasn't competing with others. I was competing with myself, you know what I mean?
Trying to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to be better and having a very hard time being better.
What would have been better for you?
Well, I had no teachers, you know. I'm self-taught. So I never really established any kind of a real discipline, you know, like a way of learning, you know, like a practice regimen. I never had any of that. You know, I just played the guitar when I played it, and I didn't when I didn't. And when I picked it up and played it, I just tried to figure things out. I wasn't practicing reading or practicing, you know, too much in techniques, you know, or approaches, you know. I wasn't studying. I wasn't learning, you know, about, I don't know what people learn about. The modes seems to be a big deal. But I had a great ear, you know, so I could find things, and I didn't need to know what it was called. That works that way. I just played and played and played and played. I always had a band.
I'm assuming listening to an awful lot of records, figuring out these pieces by ear.
But I was, you know, primarily blues, which is not too hard to figure out, you know, and influenced by, you know, Mike Bloomfield. He was my first big hero. Paul Butterfield Blues Band, of course. And then Eric Clapton, Hendrix, of course, but he was so, I had no idea what he was doing. B.B. King, I loved it. You know, I listened to a ton of it.
Yeah.
I could never do it, you know. It was just such a particular technique that I couldn't play like B.B. King until I got into my 40s or so. That influence finally just kind of showed up. I don't remember how or why exactly, but you know, the blues, you can hear it. You know, it's not hard to hear.
What makes a great blues player?
A tremendous desire to communicate. And, you know, what it is you're trying to communicate doesn't really have words. You know, you're just it's life and death. You know what I mean? It's like we're alive on this planet. And what? That's shocking, you know? And all the things that you go through, and all human beings go through them, you know? So there's just a tremendous need to kind of express your feeling about that. That's how I see it. And then having an appreciation or a connection, a way of connecting with your instrument that allows you to express yourself in a subtle way, you know, but in a controlled way.
Yeah.
You know, and so many of the greats, you know, like Albert King, Albert Collins, B.B. King, you know, they didn't have a large vocabulary, you know, but they had a lot to say, and they refined that, you know, to such a powerful thing. So, you know, it's like listening to Japanese flute or something, you know, they don't play a lot of notes, but it just penetrates, you know. So that's that, you know, that desire to communicate and then finding a way to do that, to communicate that. The blues is full of that. That's what the blues is all about.
You know, you mentioned there that listening to some of those early records, on the face of it, some aspects are simple. The hardest part, of course, is what you're talking about there, actually communicating your feelings and what you're trying to say through the music. But something that you've been amazing at doing is adding those extra colors, altered scales and what have you.
Yeah.
What was that? Just a feeling? Were these sounds that you heard in your head and then chased it, or was this sort of knuckling down with theory at some point?
Well,
being self-taught, of course.
Yeah, well, the problem was being self-taught, having had no teachers, and not having a clue of what I was hearing when I was listening to the people that I, you know, came to admire the most, which was, you know, the great jazz players. So I wanted to be a jazz guitarist, you know, but I didn't have, you know, I had no teachers. And therefore, you know, you really need to develop quickly. You really do need to study. If you want to be a jazz player, you really do need to study. You need good teachers, you know, and very few, you know. I mean, Wes Montgomery is a self-taught guitar player. So there you go.
Yeah.
You know. So I don't know. He just had a certain kind of brilliance, you know, that allowed that to happen. For me, I'm a blues guitar player who wanted to be a jazz musician. And so the least I could do was learn the chords. And then after I learned the chords, and I started doing that when I was about 19. I got the Mickey Baker book and I learned the jazz chords, you know, 13 flat 9, you know. I didn't know what it was.
The expensive chords.
Yeah. But I knew where to put it, and it sounded right to me because of the Mickey Baker book, you know. Here's how you can use that G13 flat 9. It's also a D flat raised 9, you know. Tritone substitution. I didn't know what to call it, but I got it, you know, because I could hear it. So I know how to play all these chords, and we would play, you know, like I was trying to play standards, Stella My Starlight, you know, on Green Dolphin Street. And then play the melody, band's playing away, it's like solo. And it's like, I started playing B.B. King licks. You know, it just was ridiculous. But I did it, and I did it loud, you know. I was fearless in making a fool of myself. And so I've just always just kind of kept pushing, you know. So it's like I need to know the scales that go over these chords. So I didn't really start learning that until I think I really started kind of getting into that when I played with Tom Scott and the LA Express, Joni Mitchell, that period. I was still really a blues guitar player, but I knew chords. And I had good energy and good ear. But it was, I think, after that first Joni Mitchell tour, and it was lengthy, you know, it was like 9 months off and on. And I was staying with Tom Scott during that period. And then on my own, I got a book, just like I got a book to learn the chords, and I started practicing those scales, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I'd say probably more importantly even than that was that when I was with Charlie Musselwhite, I was 19. That's when I started knuckling down on the chords, you know, because I could apply them to a Chicago blues band so easily, you know. And we did a co-bill with Larry Coryell, and Larry Coryell was kind of somebody I really looked up to in those days. I'd seen him with the Gary Burton Quartet, man. I mean, this is 1967. Well, you know, maybe 67, maybe. So it was when he was with Gary Burton, and I'm like, that's the coolest dude I ever saw. You know, he's playing an L5, right? And anyway, so we opened a show. It was a co-bill, actually, yeah, with Charlie Musselwhite and Larry Coryell in L.A. at a club called the Ash Grove, which ended at some point. But anyway, I asked Larry the question that many, you know, young guitarists ask me, which is, you know, how do you play all that out shit, you know, right? All that out shit. Yeah. And he just said, well, I use the half-step, full-step scale. I went, half-step, full-step scale. Went home. Half-step, full-step, half-step, full-step, half-step. And I just started practicing that scale. And I heard the Miles Davis thing in it, you know, that I love so much. Miles, he just hit that flat 9, just, you know, right on a chord. I'm like, oh. And it's raised 9, right? That's really kind of a raised 9 chord, diminished thing. And I'm like, wow, that's that. It was like a key for me, you know, into being able to play notes that were, quote, outside, what appeared to be outside the scale. They're not, but, you know, they sound, you know, foreign to most people's ear. So that kind of began, you know, my, opened the door to adding, you know, a little more harmonic knowledge to a blues seg.
When did you get the bug for the vintage gear? It probably wasn't vintage gear then, was it?
Yeah, I was playing vintage gear when I was in high school. Exactly. You know, I was playing in 1963, you know, as I do today, you know, a 1960 Telecaster. I've played vintage pretty much my whole life, you know. So I bought that. It was brand new, of course. I bought that. I'm wondering, how old was I? I would have been, yeah, it would have been, maybe it was a 66, you know, okay, or a 65 Guild Starfire 3. So the next good instrument I bought was brand new. It was an L5. I traded the Guild plus cash, you know, took out a loan, and bought an L5, which lasted a little while. That guitar was never really, it was never really a good guitar. I don't think it was that good of a guitar. It was an L5, you know. At the time, it was a top-of-the-line jazz instrument, you know. I think I paid $1,300 for it, and that would have been in 1965 or 6. So I traded that for an L5, excuse me, a Super 400, plus cash. It's always plus cash, you know. And that was a righteous instrument. I think it was a 63. And I was playing that when I was invited to join Tom Scott and the LA Express, and Joni Mitchell. Super 4 wasn't going to work. So Tom Scott and I went to a music store, and he said, well, Larry Carlton, who had done the record and the album, I didn't know who Larry was. He just said, Larry Carlton plays the 335. Maybe you should take a look at that. Yeah. So I bought a 66 335 that day. And that turned into a 63 335. That turned into a 58 335. So I've been playing vintage really, of course, until I did the Fender model.
Sure, of course. I mean, looking at it from the other side of it, because that's the thing these days, everyone's so obsessed with that period of the instruments, especially your 50s and the late 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
Having seen how guitar manufacturers have developed and changed over the years, do you think there is some magic in that period for these instruments?
Well, it's of course a very good and kind of salient question, because everyone's seeking that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the answer to that is that the element of age can't be reproduced, in a day. You just can't put 60 years on an instrument, and my telly is 63 years old.
And however many years the wood was beforehand as well.
A tree. So, you just can't do that. Because I wouldn't buy anything after 1963. Like that basically, I did later, but that was kind of my cutoff year. That's when, Gibson was bought out by Columbia or whatever it was, So there was a big shift. Fender, same thing. All the amps, were silver face now and all that. So that was the end of it for me. Since then, I plug into something now and I'm like, wow, that's cool. And I think that Fender is doing an amazing job with their amplifiers. Shockingly, to me, doing a good job with their amplifiers until about a few weeks go by, and then something goes wrong.
Oh, geez, okay.
So they're making great things, but they're using cheap components. And so if you have someone like, okay, let's just fix all that stuff that, you bought the amp, you got the amp, okay, let's fix all that stuff. They're great,
Yeah.
And guitars too, it's surprising. I've recently bought a couple of Strats because I'm doing this new record, which is it's kind of a tribute to Jeff Beck,
Beautiful,
and to Alexander Dumble. And I bought 2 Strats. No reason to say why 2, but they're really good guitars, man. They're cool.
Tell us a little bit about this album. Is the music written?
Oh, it's mostly recorded. I started actually last year. I put together a band. Larry Goldings, I don't know if you know these guys. Larry Goldings, Forgan, Larry. Yeah, Larry. Darryl Jones, everybody kind of knows Darryl from the Rolling Stones. And Gary Husband, do you know who Gary is?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great British drummer. We recorded in the U.S. A bunch of music. And I've recently, because of a variety of reasons, I was only recently able to resume recording.
Okay.
Big gap. So I've never worked like this, but it's the way it's going. And so I've been in the studio with my British group, and we cut another 6 or 7 things. So I have to decide between these 2 sets of recordings because the music's very different. This was the instrumental Jeff Beck tribute thing, and then over here is my British blues band.
Yeah. Sounds like 2 albums to me.
It does, but maybe I should actually look at it that way. I appreciate your saying that. You might have planted an idea. I had thought about, a double album, because I still don't exactly see how to stitch this thing together.
Well, we've waited a while for an album, so two coming along at once work well for fans, you know.
Well, are you familiar with, my last record, the studio album's called Pure? You know the record?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then since then, a live thing was released, right? Called Night in the City. Okay. Yeah. Which was kind of live version of a lot of the music from the Pure album. That wasn't so long ago, was it?
So maybe I'm just greedy, you know, but...
Well, thank you. I'm glad for that. But more importantly, record companies don't do anything to really keep anything in the public eye.
No.
There's no real promotion of anything,
It does seem to be the case for sure. Just to touch on a little bit, because I'm nosy on the Beck side of the record. Are we expecting some Beck influence phrasing? Is it that type of tribute?
Well, as I say, I bought a couple of Strats, and I haven't played Strats since like Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Which was 85. I was going to say 86, but 86. Yeah. So it's really been a lot of fun for me, and particularly developing a relationship with a guitar with a vibrato. And now when I don't have the vibrato, I really miss it. So
It's the new tool to work with.
expression, a new expression tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very physical, right? It's not a pebble. It's like you're doing it yourself, and it's very cool that way. And the music is very, it's all instrumental. That side of it was all instrumental, and it sounds like music you would have heard on the Jeff Beck record.
That sounds incredible. But could you just speak to a little bit about Beck's influence and what you felt his impact was on music history?
Well, he wasn't an influence on me coming up, because I gravitated towards the blues players, and he could play blues, but that really wasn't his thing. So he wasn't an influence on me, but I started getting the impression, that this guy's really good. And so I think, I can't remember exactly, but I just always say the date, like 2008 maybe. He was playing in California. I literally, it was like a 4-hour drive from me. And I found out that he was playing that night. And I called up somebody, and they got in touch with the venue and said, that I wanted to come in. I figured it was sold out. I couldn't get in.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure if I drive all that way. And sure enough, they said, cool, no problem, Got in the car. It's like traffic hour, man. Just made it all the way down there, parked the car, went inside, sat down, and he walked on the bandstand, just like that, So it was great timing. It was movie timing, And it was just the greatest night of listening to guitar that I'd ever had in my life. Well, I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. How friggin' good he was, And so I started to, listen. Again, not too much, because his vibrato, the use of pedals wasn't my thing. So this was a recent idea, to looking for inspiration. I thought of Jeff Beck. I'm like, that is something I've never really explored, It would be beautiful to tribute him. And also I wanted to tribute Alexander Dumble. And I thought, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And check this out. Once I made the decision to do it, I thought, I'll need a record deal. So, Provo Records.
Yeah, it's absolutely
Mascot, yeah. So I did 3 records with those guys. And so, been years since I'd talked to them. And so I just, Ed Van Zigel, yeah, look up in my email, say, there's Ed. Great, okay. I just wrote him, said, hey, Ed, Robben Ford here. Hope you're well. Just wondering, would you be interested in doing a record with me? And then I got up. No, I think I texted. because I got up, I walked over to the table, and my phone goes ding, and I walk over, I pick it up. Of course, Robben, I'd love to do another record with you. So I got a record deal in about 60 seconds. It was unbelievable, man. So I figure, okay, this is good. That's a good sign.
That's a great sign. Yeah.
And so anyway, all that worked out really well, and I got this great band together, for the recordings, and we toured it before the record came out. And we've already toured it's called Dragon Tales.
Okay.
So I call it the Dragon Tales Band.
Okay.
And that band we toured for 10 days, 2 weeks in Italy. I think it was in December?
Okay.
Or November last year.
Now, the fact that Larry Carlton is here, over the years, you've shared the stage many times.
Yep.
I spoke with Larry the other day, and we were asking him the same question about yourself. But could you talk us through, from your perspective, having worked with him for so many years and being a friend, what is the most special part of Larry's playing to you?
Well, he's a very interesting cat in that there's kind of this extreme, because we played together a lot. We toured for about 2.5 years off and on all over the world. We went everywhere. And first we went to Japan, right? And I always thought of Larry as sort of the grown-up in the room. He's like, how you doing?
Yeah.
But, of course, I had a tremendous amount of respect for him as a guy who could go into the studio and, just like accompany others. And that for me, it was the initial thing. And I think probably a lot of people felt that way. I wasn't listening to Larry, like Crusaders, all of that. I didn't know who he was when I joined Joni Mitchell and the LA Express. And so it was all very new to me, that studio world. So the first impression was his ability to walk into a room, sit down and do this ridiculous record with Steely Dan, And I couldn't do that. I hadn't a clue how to do that. So it was cool that way. I admired him in that way, But a lot of time went by before we actually connected and started playing together, really, We did a little bit in LA back then, in the 70s. But it wasn't that much, really. So, he had his breakout, career. I had mine on the other side. And I was, of course, always incredibly impressed with his playing. But what I mean by this extreme thing, so we worked together quite a lot. And we'd go out there and Larry would play, be good, everything's cool, And, it's just kind of going along, we're doing our thing. And then just one night, all of a sudden, he would just explode. And it would, hair standing on end, So I kept wondering, well, what are you waiting for, But like and he said to me once on that tour, he goes, I don't hit my home runs every night, Robben. And I'm like, I thought it was an interesting perspective, but it's just who he is. He goes out, he plays great, does his thing, But then every now and then, it's just this incredible, beast is unleashed with a guitar. And that was always it was very exciting when he would do that, I don't know what else to say, really.
Yeah, Well, it says it all, to be honest, Robben. Look, before we let you go, because we do appreciate you taking some time to chat with us today, I feel like I could talk to you for hours of your career, because it's just a who's who of all the people you've worked with. But I did want to quickly ask, working with Miles Davis, working with George Harrison, two legendary figures in music, and both very, very different characters, different, huge. Talk us through what that's like, working with legendary artists like that, but also being versatile enough to step into those situations and be able to insert yourself without overpowering the situation.
Well, I mean, those are about as extreme as you can get. George Harrison and Miles Davis. There's the gig with with George Harrison was, of course, it was an amazing opportunity to be able to work with a Beatle. And George was always my favorite Beatle. But anyway, the music was very simple, and it was already done, so you learned the part, you played the part, and the part was D, G, A minor, It wasn't a challenging gig. And so it didn't really ask a lot of me personally. So I don't know if it's the best example, once again, there was nothing creative. There was no creativity asked of me in that situation.
There must have felt like a sense of achievement to be on stage with the Beatles.
That was a hard tour, man. I don't know how much you've heard about it, but, it was, George couldn't sing. The whole tour, he had this terrible, laryngitis. And so he'd go out there and he really couldn't sing the show. And there was a lot of what went on during the 70s going on, and,
Yeah.
And kind of strange, private plane, so we would be in these huge venues for hours, sound check, setup, all of that jazz. Sometimes 2 shows in one day.
Wow.
At the Cow Palace in San Francisco. These huge venues. And you'd be there for 15 hours. And, the show was 3.5 hours long, and then you had to do it again.
Yeah.
It was really a hard, physically and emotionally and mentally, it was kind of rough, I have to say. All those cats, and I was 20. I had my 23rd birthday on that tour. Wow. So I know these guys are older than me, and, they're doing their own thing, and it was very hard for me, actually. I felt like a fish out of the water in that bunch, in that group of people. So it wasn't really fun. I hate to say it, but it's true. It wasn't really an enjoyable experience. George was very sweet to me, and he was cool. So that was nice. But, it was something I really kind of had to get through. With Miles Davis, I'd learned a lot of the lessons before I got there. I'd listened to his music probably more than any other single artist, which includes the people around him, right? Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, in particular, those two, and in particular, Wayne Shorter. So I digested a lot of it, But there was a musical device that I learned within the context of that band that I got from the keyboard player who was doing this harmonic thing, and I learned that, and that was really cool. That was the biggest takeaway in terms of learning, and just a relationship with Miles. It's like there's nobody like him, and you could never forget it. When I was with George Harrison, it was like. It wasn't the same, I actually felt comfortable around George. Miles Davis, you were always a little on pins and needles, kind of at attention, assert a little bit. But because he would mess with you, man, if he saw an opening, he'd go right in there,
What, during a live show?
Well, he might, yeah. Yeah, I would say that, yeah, that might happen. Absolutely. So it's super challenging. But we also, we wound up with a very good relationship, I felt, because I realized that he was just messing with me. And then I would just say some salty thing back to him. Took a lot of nerve.
I bet.
But I did it, and then he would laugh.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is what's up. I get it now,
Incredible, Robben. Look, thanks so much for taking the time for us to talk about your career, and we'll look forward to hearing the new music when it's ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna hold you down.